What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Ted, and each week on TED Talks, we go through with one of my guests on looking at lots of different sort of stat graphics and sort of looking at the transfer plans for Gameweek 32. And this week, I'm joined by Ryan, aka FPL Inzaghi. Thank you for joining me, mate. How are you?
Yeah, no worries at all. Thanks, Ted, for having me back again. It's good to be here. I'm doing quite well. Mid game week, a couple of games left to go, hoping for some attacking returns. It felt like the game week got off to a pretty slow start, or a fairly anticlimactic start, right? We were bigging up the likes of Reece James and whatever else, and it felt like it was going to be this huge week, and it kind of didn't really live up to that. So yeah, looking forward to discussing the game week so far, and talking about transfers as well. It's an important time of the season.
Yeah, a bit of a damp squib in terms of some of the bigger players getting benched. Trent and Reece James. Terrible. It seems like the more budget defenders came through. The City guys all kept a clean sheet. Maybe Laporte is providing a little bit more value than Cancelo, but it's only one game down. And Rudiger obviously got his goal eventually, shooting multiple times from outside the box, and what a strike that was. And then, the main man, Doherty, absolutely destroying it yesterday with a goal and an assist from left wing back. Could you see that coming?
No, not at all. And then I think he assisted Emerson Royale as well. So that's the Conte ball dream, with one win back assisting the other. It's Spurs. That was an incredible performance from them. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the stream.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's like a lot of expectation from premium defenders all of a sudden. And they seem to be like doing pretty well. So. And we might be jumping on, but we'll take a look at defenders later on. We've got some conversion graphics for them to see like who the best option is. Like, are they worth the money? Who isn't? Who is? Let's see later. But Salah blanking as well, which was annoying, but I guess it doesn't really matter because he was so heavily captained. Like, it's not really going to affect your rank. But Spurs are just absolutely flying at the moment. They're the team to talk about. Kulusevski, Son and Kane all getting FPL returns, and it's like, I know they've got a difficult double game week coming up in game week 36 and no doubles before that, but it's going to be very difficult to get rid of those guys, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah, it is. People talking about free hitting in 36 and dropping the likes of Kane and Son and Kulusevski and even Doherty now as well. I'm not sure after the recent results and performances, that's something you want to be doing. I think what's impressive about Spurs is they seem now to be clued into how Conte wants them to play. They've got this system where, you can have one or two players come in and the system doesn't change. The team's performance doesn't change. I think, for example, Reguilon missed out. Doherty plays on the left. Royal comes in. He plays well. And then we've got the likes of Lucas Moura and even Bergwijn coming off the bench and just slotting straight into the system that Conte wants his team to play. So Spurs right now with a lot to play for in terms of the top four as well. They are definitely a team that we should be targeting. I imagine most managers already have 2 to 3 assets, but remember the discussion we had a few weeks ago talking about, is it Kulusevski and Kane or is it Son and Kane? It seemed as though in the double game week, the answer was Kulusevski and Kane, but now Son in recent weeks, he's pulled that back quite a bit. And the managers who don't have Son, they seem to be scrambling a little bit at the moment, trying to find the funds to squeeze him back into their team. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, obviously, I hated going about Son this week and last week because he's done really well. But I think Kulusevski still provides tremendous value for 6.3 million, whatever he is. He got 6-7 points this week. Son only got 12. So like, if you compare them like price wise, it's probably still about the same. So I think if you're trying to squeeze in a lot of premium guys into your team, Kulusevski still really provides great value. So you can't have them all at the end of the day. I think they're all great, and it depends on your team structure, really. Like, if you need to fill up some forward options, Kane seems like a much more sensible option than Son, especially with all of these midfielders we have to pick from coming forward with Chelsea and City and Liverpool and Leicester in particular. So I think it just is team dependent at the end of the day. And yes, I regret not having Son, but I think Kane is still a really, really excellent option, if not like the best statistically. So, it is what it is. But like echoing what you were saying about Conte, like I really think that he has instilled a new culture there. And you're saying that any player can come in and do well. I mean, Emerson Royale is probably a really
Mm.
prime example of that, because the perception of him is he's not a very good player. But obviously, he did really well yesterday, which is kind of surprising. But I don't think it makes any. It's not. It doesn't not make sense, if I should try and say that, because I watched the Eric Dyer interview beforehand, and he was saying that Conte has like instilled an comfortable, like an uncomfortable comfortableness, if that makes sense. Like they're trying to work harder. He always wants more from them, and I think that's really, really being instilled in that team, and they're firing on all cylinders. So many goals, so difficult to go without them.
Yeah, for sure. They're looking quite good. The assets, Doherty and Kane and Son, and Kulusevski, of course. Like, we want to try and squeeze 4 Spurs players into our team. I don't think I would have been saying that when we had Nuno as the manager earlier in the season. But full credit to Conte. Like, as a United fan, the contrast is quite interesting between what Conte has been able to do in a relatively short space of time versus what Ragnick has not really been able to achieve in a similar amount of time. Because Ragnick came in not too long after Conte was appointed at Spurs. And in that short space of time, he made a couple of signings in January, but in that short space of time, Conte has been able to implement the system at Spurs. And I think that's the order. It's the system, and then the players come into that system. Whereas with United, it feels like they're trying to put kind of square pegs in round holes, so to speak, that this system doesn't really fit the players. They're switching between formations. The players, so if we have Ronaldo, for example, who drops out, there's not really a like-for-like replacement. The system falls apart a little bit. But then at Spurs, you can lose a player or two, but they just keep on playing the way Conte wants them to play. So I just kind of bring that up to highlight the contrast there between Spurs and United. I think it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, and of course you're a United fan, so you kind of know more about it than most. But I think that the comparisons between United and Spurs are quite stark in terms of I wonder how much influence Ranić actually has to instill a new culture at the club. I think would be impossible, because some of those players in the United squad, I would sort of assume, would think that they're bigger than conforming to doing something or living their life at the club in the training ground in a way that the manager wants them to, like Eddie Howe has instilled at Newcastle, like Conte has done at Spurs. And I'm not saying Kane is not, bigger than Spurs or bigger than the manager, but he seems to have a sense of humility that maybe someone as huge on social media like Paul Pogba or Cristiano Ronaldo might have that overarching influence at Man United. So it's very interesting. It seems like there's a couple of examples, specifically Newcastle and Spurs, where the manager has come in and just completely changed everything, and it seems to have worked for them. Surprising to see Newcastle concede so many goals, though, because they've been doing well. In any case, the last thing to talk about before we actually move on and talk about some of the graphics and content and have a look at our bus teams for Game Week 32, the last things we have to mention about Game Week 31 are the double Game Week guys, Burnley and Everton. Anthony Gordon bench was such a pain for FPL managers, especially as he had like a run of 7 straight games. Weghorst owners, I guess you weren't assuming that you were going to get any returns from the City game. Sadly got booked on top of that, but I think you've got to fancy your chances against Everton. Like, Everton were woeful.
Yeah, and without Michael Keane now as well for that game against Burnley, I had flashbacks to the Dennis double game week when Weghorst picked up that booking against City. I thought, no, not again. Another forward in a double game week who gets a second yellow card. I've fallen for it again. I think Burnley, that result against City was kind of always going to happen for them. It was kind of any manager who invested in a Burnley asset really just saw that game as 1 or 2 points and move on to the Everton match. Anthony Gordon, surprising benching. I think he started every game since Lampard has taken over as manager, or at least he's started the last 5 matches. So, a bit of a surprise. Lampard in the pre-match kind of press conference, he was talking Gordon up, and he was saying how pleased he's been with Gordon, and then he goes and drops him. It's the front three of Damari Gray, Richarlison, and Calvert-Lewin, which is probably their strongest 3. I'm not sure whether Gordon comes back into the starting 11 for the match against Burnley. They've got an injury in midfield to Van der Beek. Holgate came in last minute to fill that void. Yeah, Alan, I think he might still be suspended for the match against Burnley. So, yeah, does Gordon come back into midfield, or has he lost his place now?
I don't think so. I think he's still like a really bright young talent. I think he has proven himself, and as you said, Lampard talked himself up. Maybe what's happened is that Lampard just wanted to change it up, and he's got a short turnaround for the next game, so wanted to rest Gordon maybe and just get a result there instead. Like, who knows? I think Gordon's like definitely vying for starting 11 spot, and I think they're going to try and accommodate him most of the time. So I don't think he's lost his place at all. No, fingers crossed for Gordon owners, he comes back and gets a return. But yes, let's move on to the graphics. But before then, a word from our sponsors. SoRare Academy is a card collecting fantasy game that allows you to collect some cards if you win this free fantasy competition, which is picking 5 key players from the Europeans' top leagues. And this competition coming up is free to play, and it runs from Friday until Tuesday. Closing deadline is 11 a.m. on Friday. And you can win some cards. You can get into the SoRare game and compete for like prizes, build up your squad with all of these cards. Az created this graphic for me and put Wout Weghorst in ahead of Mbappe. So thanks for that, Az. I think the Norwich fixture is good for Burnley. It'll be a really interesting game, to be honest, because I can't call it. Are Burnley like better than Norwich? I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know. It seems like having Weghorst alongside Lionel Messi is a little bit.
He looks out of place. Yeah.
But yes, if you fancy giving this a go, it's free to play. Just pick 5 players: goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, and then a wild card player from all of the Europeans' top leagues. You don't need to buy Weghorst if you don't want to. But yes, on to the actually, what am I going to do? Yeah, we're going to start with the graphics. Ryan, let's go for it. Let's have a look at the fixtures first. Actually, that makes sense. So we've got the fixture graphic up here. Just top of the ticker, really. What is it? 8 or 9 teams that have the best fixtures over the next 6 game weeks. And of course, these are only the confirmed ones. We've got some almost certain double game weeks in 36 and 37. Those haven't been included yet, so that's likely to change the ordering here. But Arsenal at the top, Brighton at home up next, and then a double game week against Southampton and Chelsea. Pretty tasty, but that's not really too much news for everyone. I'm sure quite a lot of us have Arsenal players already. Burnley, Weghorst owners will be hoping for a return against Norwich and in the double game week. Leicester, we're going to be looking to bring in Harvey Barnes, Maddison, even maybe a cheap defender such as Wesley Fofana, who made his return at the weekend, and even before actually in the European. Palace have a really good run of fixtures, especially after, from now really. Leicester and Newcastle aren't particularly strong at the back, even though Newcastle's been fairly good recently, but that 4-1 against Spurs might show that they're a bit more leaky. But look at that run of fixtures for Palace. Very, very good. No double game week, of course, but do we start eyeing Zaha up, or anyone else for that matter? Do we then look at Man United? Jadon Sancho had a disappointing performance after the hype last week. Bruno Fernandes and Ronaldo could be key options for game week 33 with their double against Norwich and Liverpool. But are Brentford back on the radar? And Burmo and Tony masterclass against Chelsea. And of course, Christian Eriksen could be a little bit of a differential. West Ham up next, and then Watford in game week 33. We know about Man City. When on earth are we going to bring those guys into our squads? After Liverpool, Brighton, Watford, Leeds, Newcastle, West Ham. Fantastic run of fixtures, rushing to get those guys into our teams. Breuer at Southampton has been pretty disappointing, but Ward-Prowse stood up and took that free kick as he usually does. Is he back on the menu? And then, of course, Spurs at the bottom there. Really, really good run of fixtures still. I'm not sure we'll be looking to get rid of any of those players. So, Ryan, anything stick out for you? Are you going to be looking for a Palace player at some point?
Well, I wish I had the opportunity to get a player like Wilfred Zaha in. I do like Zaha from an FPL point of view. I just think that at this stage of the season, with the doubles that we've got, I feel so kind of imprisoned, if you like, by the doubles. I've got Arsenal players, for example, they double in 33 and then they double in 36. So I don't want to be selling my Arsenal players between 33 and 36. But at the same time, I want to target teams like Manchester City. I'd love to jump on some of the Crystal Palace players as well. Leicester's fixtures are quite nice. And Brentford, you mentioned Brentford, Ivan Toney has kind of been going under the radar. Typically, we'd be trying to bring an Ivan Toney into our team. West Ham's fixtures aren't too bad in the short term either. I know that they're not on screen, but with the double game weeks, all of our transfers are kind of shoehorned into who doubles and when do they double so I can get them in. And with Palace only having one double, likely in 36, I just don't see an opportunity for me to bring one of their players in before that time. I mean, the fixture in 32 against Leicester's great. They've got Newcastle, Leeds, Southampton, Watford. As you've said, some incredible fixtures, but when do you get a Crystal Palace player into your team?
Well, I mean, don't forget that they also have an Everton fixture yet to be rearranged. So that's likely to become a double game week for them. But yeah, I completely get your point about being that sort of tunnel vision for double game weeks. And I think there's a difference here. If it's a decent team with double game weeks, absolutely no problem targeting those guys. But if it's someone with lackluster attack or defense, then it's something that we don't necessarily need to fall into the trap with. Maybe focusing from a top player in a top team with single game weeks is an equally achievable prospect and probably better for the long run. So I think Palace, they've been really in form recently. I mean, arguably the entire season, to be fair. And with this run of fixtures, I mean, they have really nothing to play for. That's the only downside, I would say. But especially if they've got a double game week on the horizon, potentially against Watford and Everton, I'm not 100% sure whether it slots into 36. But that's an incredibly appetizing double game week. And if it's preceded by some of the worst defences in the league, goodness, I'd be tempted. I'd be really tempted.
Yeah, for sure. I can see the temptation there for Palace in 36. And I guess it kind of adds weight to the potential free hit in game week 36 because it means that you can jump on the really nice double game week fixtures like Crystal Palace have. Leicester, a similar team. But you mentioned there Crystal Palace having something to play for. And I think that is so key because not only are we trying to balance our transfers, our very limited transfers, on teams that have a double game week, but we also want to target teams that have something to play for. I think we really saw that play out in the Chelsea, City, and Liverpool fixtures over the weekend. Thomas Tuchel was kind of lamenting the fact that his players were traveling and, tired from the kind of international football and being away from the training ground and whatnot. And, he seemed quite frustrated at full time. And it was a really poor display from Chelsea. Liverpool and City equally had players away. And I don't think Liverpool were really at their best from an attacking point of view. But there's something in teams having something to play for. And I think that with Chelsea kind of looking like they've got that third spot locked up, Crystal Palace, a team with not heaps to play for, they're safe now. There's the financial incentive of trying to finish higher in the table, I guess. But the point that you've just made is a really important one. We're not just trying to target teams who have double game weeks, but we're trying to target teams that have something to play for. And for me, Crystal Palace, whilst they have the double, outside of a free hit in 36, I just don't see how I can squeeze them in with the limited transfers.
It's really interesting like that. The midfield, I think, is a really tricky ground to play in, and we've got so many options to try and squeeze into our sides, like Saka, Salah, one of the Spurs guys, Madison or Barnes, maybe a Palace player, maybe Ward-Prowse even,
Yeah.
maybe a City midfielder, maybe a Chelsea midfielder, maybe a Man United midfielder. I mean, so many to fit in. Like, priorities are going to be really tricky to move and not do hokey cokies the whole time, like one player in, one player out, that sort of thing. Boosting your entire squad is probably more important. So picking which of the guys you want right now in the next couple of weeks probably will reap the rewards rather than just moving from one to the other. But like for me, I'm probably going to be looking at Madison at some point. I think that makes sense. But I am genuinely very tempted to move, I don't know, like Kulusevski to a Zaha at some point, if we think that Zaha's going to be fit for the rest of the season, which is another matter. But yeah, really, really tricky. Yeah, I think it's...
City look good, don't they? The fixtures from 33 through to 36, when they likely double in 36 or 37, I've got an eye at the moment to move Son to Bruno Fernandes for captaincy in 33. But then I've got this 11.7, 11.6 million midfielder, and I can go straight to a Kevin De Bruyne or to a Foden or even a Sterling or Mahrez for that Watford fixture at home in 34. And some comments from Pep as well. I think the picture, that we're kind of seeing right now, like that's being painted for the end of the season, of Liverpool and City are both gunning for the Premier League title. Pep has come out and said that, they're talking about goal difference, right? So Pep's talking about goal difference, wanting to put on a few more goals than just the 2-0. Watford at home in 34. That is a huge fixture if we're talking about goal difference. Watford defended well at Anfield, granted, but Watford and Leeds and even Brighton for City, those are fixtures from an attacking point of view which look really enticing.
I think like what you were saying about the something to play for, I've always been a bit skeptical about how that actually influences teams, because at the end of the day, they're a corporate machine and they want to achieve as high a place as they can in the Premier League because it means more money for them at the end of the day. But I do think that if every team sort of plays to that 80% of what they're capable on, even on like a I don't care day, it's that extra 20%. If they've got something to play for, it's that desperation level for achieving something that is special to that team, which is really going to drive them forwards. And it's that extra bit that could make the difference between you having a great game week in your FPL team. So if you focus on those teams, yeah, I get it. I get it. But I don't think it's the be all and end all, because it's only 20% on top of, if you're picking good players from good teams that don't have anything to play for, you're still going to get a really good performance out of them. It's just that desperation level at the end, I think.
But I think it can be a little bit more tangible than that, though. Like, for instance, if Pep Guardiola is at home to Watford and he's chasing goal difference on Liverpool, for instance, and they're up 2-0, then maybe he brings on a Mahrez instead of bringing on a more defensive-minded player, or maybe he kind of puts on an extra forward, or so it's those things which I think can be a little bit more tangible, can be a little bit more predictive in that. From an attacking point of view, he will want his players to try and score more goals. He will want his players to try and get that kind of extra goal to boost their goal difference. And I think if we tap into that, there might be something in that from an FPL point of view.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's not just the players' attitude. It's the whole managers, the team structure, the strategy-based decisions that might also encourage that result. Yeah, completely agree with you. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, really interesting. And as you said, like Chelsea might have nothing to play for. Does that put you off doubling up further on down the season? Because they've got Southampton next, but then after that, I think it's Arsenal, West Ham, and then a fairly decent double game week in 36. But are you going to go more than Reece James or Reece James and Havertz? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I was really disappointed in the way Chelsea played against Brentford. They shifted to a back four again, and they played Rudiger and Thiago Silva as the two centre-backs in a back four. Now, Thiago Silva is 37 years old. He doesn't really have the legs to play in a back four anymore. He looks good in a back three. Rudiger loves to go walkabouts in a back three, which he's allowed to do when he's got that extra centre half to cover him. But I just didn't get that formation from Chelsea, from Tuchel. And yeah, they didn't really look good. So I don't at the moment want to add to my Reece James. Havertz, he missed a couple of big chances. We were talking about him last week as someone who was his conversion was quite high. I'm not sure if you saw the highlights of that game. What did you make of Havertz's performance?
I think he just missed some of the key opportunities. I think it's the same story for Havertz. Like he's not really that involved in the game, but when he gets his chances, he normally puts them away. But we did see last week when he looked at his conversion graphic that it was quite high on the big chance conversion. So I just wonder whether that it sort of evened itself out in that Brentford match where he's missed a couple of big opportunities. But I mean, still, the fact that he's getting those opportunities still makes me think that he could be a really decent FPL asset until the end of the season. And I kind of regret going Foden over Havertz, although I think probably the latter will be a better option in City's great fixtures from game week 34 in particular. But yeah, I think Reece James and Havertz will be pretty template in game week 36, especially for those who are free hitting, for example. So yeah, not the end of the world. But yes, I mean, the good thing about this season is we have plenty of teams who have something to play for. Spurs and Arsenal, I'm not sure we're all going to be getting off them because they're always going to be vying for that fourth spot, especially as they play each other in game week 36. It has sort of been, I don't think it's been confirmed, but there's been rumours that it definitely is looking like it's going to be game week 36 double. And, you know, with 2 game weeks to go after that, and I think Spurs have like Norwich and Burnley in 37 and 38. Really difficult to go without Arsenal or indeed Spurs. So yeah, really difficult to fit everyone in our squads, and I think that's particularly difficult when we're loading up on premium defenders. So yeah, really difficult balancing act.
Arsenal's last 2 fixtures of the season: Newcastle and Everton, Tottenham has Burnley and Norwich. Yeah. So yeah, you don't want to be losing these guys. So it feels like at the moment, you rattled off earlier about 7 or 8 players that we want to bring into our teams. And a friend of mine was on a free hit this game week, and he went big on City, and he went big on Liverpool and Chelsea against Brentford. And that looked so strong on paper. And I was watching your Burning Questions episode with Prass last week, and I was looking at his team, and I was so envious. That was a ridiculous team.
It was.
His team was so good that he had to put Doherty on the bench, right? And so I feel like there's that meme where, you know, you're kind of looking at something that's a little bit more tempting, at the woman that's more tempting or enticing, but you're forgetting about the woman that served you so well for so long. And I think in many respects, we're looking at the likes of Reece James and Havertz and Foden and KDB, but then we've got Son and Doherty and Saka and whatever else saying, what about me? I've served you well. And I think that is the danger in some respects, that we kind of think about what we don't have and forget about the players that we actually still have in our squads that are performing well.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I mean, overextending ourselves, especially with many, many hits for players that won't necessarily play. I know there was some conjecture about these guys' fitness. It just seems like a bit of a short-term strategy that doesn't always pay off. So yeah, but as FPL managers, we always want more from our squads. And, you know, last week's bandwagon could be, you know, someone pretty meh in your squads at the moment. You're like happy to have them, but you kind of forgotten how good they were. So yeah, it's always worth appreciating what you actually have in your squad, but we're always trying to improve, aren't we? And yeah, don't do it too quickly. I think Reece James is a good transfer in this week, though, to be fair. Anyway, let's move on to the next graphic. We're going to have a look at the last 6 game weeks of returns. We've got the return diagram here. These are just the 4 different types of goals and assists you can have, the big and the small. And the story kind of shows that it's Arsenal and Spurs who are leading both all categories, and it's probably not surprising to see Lacazette and Saka in the small department, and Kane and Kulusevski and Son in the big department with small assists, small goals, big assists. Spurs are killing it for the big chances. And Arsenal are just clearly so good at scoring wonder goals, they can do it consistently. And Lacazette's just been mopping up the small assists. But there's also Coutinho there with the small goals. Like, have we forgotten about him? Will we want him back for Aston Villa's potential double game week in 34? Nice to see Doherty up there with small assists, 3 small assists. And then Tony underneath Kane for the big goals, 5 big goals. I think most of them have been penalties, but nevertheless, we talk about them. And there was a glowing reference on Match of the Day for Tony and Mbermo. Could be a tempting option for a forward line that doesn't really exist anymore. Like, we're not massively enamoured with our forward line. But yeah, Tony, decent performance against Chelsea. Could be he one for the future. And then the big assists, Kulusevski with 4. Going to be really difficult getting rid of him because he's someone I'm eyeing up to get rid of, but only because of the fixtures, only because I want some Leicester guys, only because maybe Zaha could be an option. I could be tempting to keep because it kind of feels really forced to get rid of a player who's actually returning. Like last week, Ryan, we looked at the Kulusevski graphic, and his big chances created were almost as good as the best player in the game, Bruno Fernandes. And what happened? He created a big chance for Son and he scored it. Big assist. It's those things are predictive. Yeah. Do we want to get rid of a guy who's playing in probably the most attacking team in the league right now? I'm not sure whether that's fixture dependent, but they're scoring the most goals, Spurs. Do we want to get rid of some guy, Kulusevski, who's providing such value? Really, really difficult. And then Kane and Son, top 3 players, Spurs, for big assists. Then we've got Robertson, then Sancho. Robertson's been converting them really well recently. Does anyone else stand out on that chart for someone that we're potentially ignoring? I mean, these are the guys who've got points recently, so probably aren't ignoring anyone, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anyone there that stands out as someone that we've ignored. I mean, the Tony results recently, you're right, he has scored a couple of penalties and he played well against Chelsea. He got his return in that game as well, but he doesn't have a double game week. And that's what we're talking about. Like, these are transfers that normally we would be looking to make, but without a double game week, it's hard to justify spending one of our 7 remaining transfers on an Ivan Toney. Interesting point around Kulusevski. It's hard for Kulusevski's owners to celebrate any of his attacking returns because he's likely setting up the guys that they don't own, right? So if you've got Kulusevski and you see him slide that pass through to Son, you're thinking, yep, I've got an assist here. Oh no, Son, the guy who I don't own, scores the goal. So it's difficult, isn't it, as Kulusevski owners to get too excited about his returns. Interestingly, in the last 6, his expected goals, non-penalties, just 1.3 compared to Son, 3.5, and Kane is similar as well. So he's getting really great attacking returns from his assists, but he's often assisting guys like Son and Kane, who are, of course, getting the goals. So would I sell Kulusevski? I think I'd find it hard to sell him now, knowing he's got some good fixtures. He's got Brighton at home in 33, and then he's got Brentford at 34, I believe, and of course he's got the double in 36. But you know what? If there's an opportunity to move, to a midfielder like a Maddison or Harvey Barnes or someone around that price point who does double in the short term, yeah, I can see the temptation there, because it's not that difficult to get Kulusevski back, is it? It's not like you're selling a Son and you're bringing him down to a Coutinho or a Foden, and then all of a sudden you're going to have to stump up the money to go back to him.
Transfers are so precious, though. I wouldn't like to transfer him out and then get him back in, but I completely see what you're saying, though. Like, it's really difficult. Like, watching Spurs is like a mental maths problem where you're going, oh yeah, pass it. Oh, regret. Oh no, do I want this? I don't know whether I want this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've got Doherty, I've got Kane, I've got Kulusevski. Don't pass it to Son, the only guy I don't have. Anyway, I think the fact that he's involved so much, and I think his chances created were really good as well. He's definitely not something I'm immediately looking to get rid of. If we've got other
Mm,
players in our squad like Coutinho or Rafinha in particular from game week 33, who both blank, maybe
mm.
use those guys as the make weight to get your Leicester or your Newcastle or your Burnley or whoever you're going to load up with in the double game week. Kulusevski, I would be very scared about selling in the meantime because he's getting points at the end of the day. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
who he's passing to, as long as he's getting me points, he's providing
yeah.
value. So yeah.
We can kind of force players out, right? Like we can look at someone and think, you know what, like you need to go to make way rather for this particular player that I'm eyeing up. But you're selling a perfectly good asset right now. Kulusevski is integral to everything that Spurs are doing well. Spurs as a team are generating such fantastic attacking stats. They've got good fixtures to come up. I think selling a Kulusevski at this stage is kind of unwise. I wouldn't go for it unless you have that wild card in 34 and you have the potential to bring him back, because I think you definitely want double Spurs attack for the run in.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of questions in the chat. Bernardo Santos is saying KDB has been ignored because we've either got Son, Kane, and Salah. I kind of agree with that to a certain extent. I don't understand how KDB has just changed his entire makeup of FPL points to just scoring really difficult goals. He's not on penalties. He doesn't score any big chances. He's got hardly any assists this year. But again, he scored at the weekend. It was much closer to goal, but it was still absolutely fantastic technique. And this guy is like one of the best shot makers in the entire game. Can we just expect more goals from KDB now until the end of the season? Have City changed the way that they've played so much that they're not scoring like goals from 2 yards out that KDB used to make for them? I find it such a difficult transition to understand. Like KDB's still a good asset, but he's completely changed the way he's played.
Yeah, I mean, he's scored the fifth most. At the end of the day, we're here to talk about FPL points, right? Like we can
Yeah.
talk about expected data and whatnot, but FPL points is what translates to improving or hindering, I guess, our rank. He's scored the fifth most FPL points in the last 6 matches. So KDB, for all of his small chances, long range shots, he's still scoring FPL points. I thought his goal against Burnley was very interesting. He found himself inside the box, just outside the 6-yard box, firing a half volley into the roof of the net. KDB, a couple of months ago, probably doesn't get into that position. I mean, he operates from deep. He operates just outside the 18-yard box. But, kind of moving that far forward, I think was a really interesting kind of positioning from KDB. Haven't seen enough from City, really, to give you a comprehensive answer with regards to their kind of team formation and their strategy and how KDB fits into that. But he is a world-class player. We have been ignoring him. His price point is difficult, though. At 11.7, how do you fit him, Salah, and Kane into your team when you could probably go for someone like Foden, who might not get you the same amount of points, but if we're talking about points per million, points per value, I think Foden would come close to KDB.
Yeah, obviously having a cheaper City asset that's likely to play more expected minutes. Yeah, definitely up for that, even though he hasn't exactly been setting the world alight recently. But yeah, like going back to your point about squeezing in De Bruyne into our sides, the only way I can see myself doing it is to downgrade someone like Lacazette to a budget forward, and then upgrade one of my 6 million midfielders to KDB, and then start playing 4 or 5 at the back with like a 4-5-1. And I can see myself kind of doing that because having 3 City for their good run of fixtures, I can kind of see it as being a bit of a differential. And, KDB, as you've mentioned, he's in really good form. So yeah, really difficult one to puzzle. But as you said earlier, with Arsenal, they've got a really good run end of the season, something to play for. Removing Lacazette might be a bad option.
Yeah, but you mentioned Lacazette before. Look at the small assists there. 4 small assists. I think the game Arsenal played against Watford was really interesting. They won 3-0, but their expected goals in that game was, I think, just under 1. Like the goals they scored were screamers from outside the box. I think maybe Saka or Odegaard scored one from just inside. But They scored goals from really small chances,
Yeah.
and Lacazette has been profiting from that generally. How sustainable is that? So, if you like, generally speaking, converting small chances is quite low as a percentage, and so if Lacazette is relying on small chances, small assists to get his FPL points, are you that worried about transferring him out for a budget to enable a KDB?
You can look at it from two different ways, and I think your point is really well made. Like, normally I would say, yeah, if people are scoring like a disproportionate amount of small assists or small goals, that it's not sustainable, and the conversion's going to come back to bite them, and people transferring them into their FPL teams are going to be disappointed because they can't continue to score screamers the whole time. But Saka's kind of proven that he is really good at scoring these type of goals. And
Yeah.
like, who am I to say he can't continue to do that? It's a really difficult one. It's like head versus this new perception that you're trying to digest and you're trying to trust whether it's going to continue. So for the time being, I'm quite happy having them in the side until I see that degrading of chances, the degrading of the conversion, which is probably the most important thing. If they start missing all of these opportunities, then I can be like, yeah, I'll get rid of them now because they haven't got really anything else to their game apart from maybe
Yeah.
penalties for Lacazette.
Yeah, that's true. But I just think with Lacazette at 8.4, he's averaging 4.7 points per start, right? Which is in the last 6 matches, that's level with guys like Ben Davies, Ben Mee, Ruben Diaz, Laporte. So if that's what he's averaging per start for 8.4 million, is that value?
Yeah, it's really difficult to say. Like, I think normally in previous seasons when Salah has done like the best in the game, the proportion between his price and what he achieves per game is normally about zero point 0.6. So you just said he was what, about 5 points per game, Lacazette? So
Yeah, rounded up
five,
to 5.
yeah, 5 out of what, 8.3 is probably about the same ballpark, but it's an average. It's like that's probably what you'd expect to get as a points per million. But yeah, I don't think he's a particularly exciting asset to own. I think he does a job, and I think he's been incredibly consistent, and that's why he's been effective. But as soon as that starts falling away, then I would be looking to get rid and maybe getting some more exciting premium option in midfield. But it's a
Yeah.
really really tricky, like lots of midfield options to fit in your side and only 5 spaces. So
Yeah, I think the argument though swings more against Lacazette when you're talking about downgrading him to fund someone like a KDB or a more premium midfielder, because you might have captaincy enter the discussion there. And I know that, I do agree with what you're saying about, Salah at his best is only just getting the amount of points that he costs in terms of pounds and whatever else. I understand that point. I do agree. But if we're thinking about game week 34, we've talked about the fixtures already. Man City, for instance, play Watford in 34. We know that Tottenham have some really nice fixtures at the end of the season with Burnley and Norwich. So if downgrading a Lacazette to enable a Son or a KDB premium in midfield or a Bruno in midfield for game week 33 when they double, if that allows you to get a premium midfielder in for captaincy, I think that sways the ledger more against Lacazette and more in favour of bringing in a premium. But I'm saying all of this because that's what I did last week. So
is I get what you're saying, but I
yeah,
kind of echo what you were saying earlier when we were talking about fixtures and feeling fairly locked in to the double game weeks. And removing Lacazette when he's got a double game week against Southampton and Chelsea to another player in a different position, which will cost me 2 transfers to do, it just feels like I can't do it. So
sure.
I'm going to have to bide my time and get him out for maybe KDB in game week 34, for example, if I can possibly do that. But
Sure.
who knows whether I'll actually do it, because it's a bit of a faff, to be honest. And there aren't that many good forwards at the moment. Like Lacazette's been consistent at least. I know he's kind of expensive, but
He's got good fixtures, it's not a bad hold.
Right, let's move on from returns and have a look at the best underlying stats for the best players in the game. We'll talk about Salah here because normally he is the best for big attempts. Attempts are shots plus chances created. Those are split into the big attempts and the small attempts. Top right is the best player in the game, basically. And Salah is doing better for the small attempts, worse than Son and Kane and Tony for the big attempts. That might explain his recent poor form in the last 4 game weeks. Yes, he's got a goal against Brighton, but that was from the spot. And before then, it was that game week 26, double game week against, was it Norwich and Burnley he played? But yeah, if you discount game week 26, I would expect that Salah's stats would be a little worse than this as well. But nonetheless, he's still getting the chances to a certain extent. But I don't know about you, Ryan. My patience is wearing a little bit thin on Salah, and I'm not sure he's a captain option this week at all, especially against City.
Yeah, watching that game against Watford at the weekend, he just looked sluggish. His first touch was off. It was quite worrying, actually, and I think that's what you pick up if you have the opportunity to watch the game. The stats might tell you that Salah had 5 or so shots inside the box, and he had an XG of whatever it might have been from that particular game. I don't have it at hand, but watching that game, he just looked really off it, and I think whether it's a mixture of lack of confidence following the World Cup qualifier exit, the AFCON, whether it's travel or whatever it might be going on for Salah, there are a couple of times that he was kind of played in, and then his first touch just got away from him. And, in previous weeks, he takes that in his stride and he finds the bottom corner. And I don't think it's because of his teammates being unable to create chances. Robertson looked so good in that game. It was really scary. I saw your tweet. It was so scary to watch Robertson and Liverpool without him in my FPL team. So I think Salah's teammates are looking quite good. Curtis Jones didn't really help Salah playing out there in midfield. I would much prefer to see Trent and Naby Keita and Henderson rather than having Curtis Jones in there. But all of that to say, I do agree with you. I think Salah at the moment is not justifying his price tag, but we deliberated so much about Trent Alexander-Arnold last week, and most managers kept him. And I think with Salah, unless you have the wild card, he is a hold, because trying to get him back into your team is going to be a near impossible task. But captaincy is an important point you make. I'm not captaining him in game week 32. I don't think you are as well. Are you looking elsewhere for captaincy?
Yeah, looking like Harry Kane at the moment, but it's a difficult one. Like, you could go for a differential option this week if you really wanted to. I'm not sure there's a real standout option, but yeah, Salah's got the vice captain at the moment. But I haven't really considered it that much, to be honest. I think Kane is probably the most obvious, considering his big attempts. He's creating a lot of big chances for his teammates. He's on penalties. He's in absolutely fantastic form. Like, he's probably the one against an Aston Villa side that hasn't exactly been solid at the back. So he's probably my captain this week. But yeah, I'm not even going near Salah. Like, just to elaborate on what you were saying, I'm not sure I would have the balls to sell him, because I think he has the capacity to turn it back on. And when he does, when Liverpool start whirring again as a cohesive unit, creating lots of big chances, like Trent getting a run of games back, Robbo continuing to do what he's doing, and playing against certain sides that are a little bit more leaky, then Salah is just going to mop up. Like when he played Leeds, it wasn't Norwich and Burnley, it was Leeds and Norwich, wasn't it, in game week 26?
Correct.
Yeah, Leeds was the game. I know he didn't get an open... Oh, did he get an open play goal?
No, he scored 2 penalties.
2 penalties, yeah. But still, he's going to get those big opportunities. I think I remember him missing a couple of one-on-ones. And that's all I want Salah. He's great for converting the big chances. But when we're looking at, on this chart, like loads and loads of small attempts, hasn't scored any or assisted any, his small return conversion is particularly poor. And that's been consistent for the last 4 or 5 seasons. He is a mammoth at converting big chances, but but terrible at converting the difficult efforts. And that might go against our perceptions. Like, I remember all the goals he scored against Palace when he was benched. Those were small chances. I can remember loads of times that Salah's popped it in the top corner from outside the box. That's definitely a small chance. But the fact is, he has so many efforts that it just reduces that conversion so much. And sometimes when he's not in form, he just doesn't score any of those efforts at all because they require confidence.
Yeah, I think there's another type of goal that Salah scores though, and I think we're not seeing him do it at the moment, and that is when he picks up the ball in a position of a small chance and he turns that into a big chance when he actually takes the shot. So, Salah has scored multiple goals where he receives the ball in immense pressure, surrounded by multiple defenders, and he can weave through those defenders and get a shot through legs, and that goes into the corner of the goals. And the XG on that might be particularly high because he took it from the 6-yard box, but he had 4 defenders in front of him at the time. And when you take that into account, which the XG models are slowly starting to do, but they haven't really got around to that yet. When you take all of that information into account, is that really a big chance? I'm not undermining the historical data because I do agree with you, but I'm just trying to say that I think that there's another type of goal that Salah scores where he takes a small chance and he turns it into a big chance through his skill, through his movement, through his positioning. And I think with Salah at the moment, his XGI is still quite high. The stats are still there for Salah. He's just not converting. And knowing his skill across multiple seasons, I think it's only a matter of time before that turns back again.
Do you know what I really wish would happen? I think the occasion next Sunday against Man City, sometimes these massive games are enough to just spur a player back into form. And I wonder if he gets something against City. He did earlier in the season. And I think he scored one of those little goals that you were talking about, Ryan. Like the
Exactly. Yeah.
So, never know. The magic of the occasion could whir him back into action. But yeah, at the moment, he's pretty underwhelming, but it's Salah. It's Liverpool. They've got a title race to decide. He's going nowhere for me. He's just not a captain option this weekend just because of the volatility in that fixture. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, agreed.
But let's talk about someone else other than Salah. And, you've got the Spurs guys here dominating the underlying stats, and that's to be expected. But you've also got like Fernandes and Ronaldo under the radar here for game week 33. And I think the fixtures said that they have Everton next, which is
correct. Yep.
A prime fixture. So I'm not 100% sure how we would get Ronaldo or Fernandes in our teams, but if you had the capacity to do it, might be a decent option for the next couple of game weeks.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you've brought this up, Ted. I was going to ask you the same question. You've got Son there, and I have Son in my team. I'm eyeing up a Son to Bruno move for game week 33. I'd like to be able to do that in 32. United are playing Everton, as you said, but it is Everton at Goodison. So there's a slight caveat there. They are a little bit of a different team at Goodison. But Fernandes and Ronaldo, looking at your graphic here, they still looking quite healthy with regards to their big attempts and small attempts, particularly for Fernandes. So that move from Son to Fernandes for the double game week against Norwich at Old Trafford, the game against Liverpool is really just a bonus match. I see the value in that. And I think with double game week 33, captaincy being so spread, being so difficult, I think making that move to bring in a Fernandes for captaincy is a really justifiable one looking at this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to move Son to Fernandes this week because obviously he's in such good form. But Villa are probably a much better side than Everton in game week 32 for Man United. So if you did it over the period of 2 game weeks and then moved Fernandes on to like a KDB, it actually might be a quite fruitful move, but it's scary losing such an informed player in Son and an informed team in Spurs. But at the end of the day, we're going to want to target the double game weeks, which Spurs don't. They play Brighton, which is a good fixture, to be fair. And there is a warning sign about ignoring some of the best teams with the best fixtures. But if you're covering Spurs with the likes of Kane already, then I don't think it's the worst move in the world at all, because you're also
Mm,
hedging your bets to a certain extent.
mm.
And we've got lots more to cover from game week 34. So Spurs are going to be less of a a triple up option and more of a side that you've just got to cover with one key player, I'd say, and maybe a Doherty when you don't play all of your premium defenders. So yeah, I kind of like it. If you want to make up some ground, I think it's a really decent move, but I wouldn't personally be rushing to do that, only if it makes sense for your team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you need to take into account hits as well. You were mentioning before about taking multiple hits to try and have the best team you can possibly have each and every game week. And that's just not going to work, even with only 7 game weeks left. For me, we'll talk about my transfers later on, but Son to Fernandes and then Fernandes to a City midfielder, those are moves that I can make for free. I don't want to take multiple hits to try and facilitate that. But if you can do something like that for free, I think it's a great move. Yeah, look at Kane right out in front there. And we've talked about captaincy just before, looking at the big attempts from Kane, big returns above his name, 1.1 there. Yeah, Kane is just on another level at the moment. And Spurs, you've got Son, Kulusevski. Yeah, they're talking about them from an attacking point of view. Certainly one to invest in if you haven't already.
So I think the advantage you have in your team structure is that you have my Lacazette money tied up in Son in midfield, which is an easy switch to Fernandes to De Bruyne, whereas I have to sort of make 2 transfers in order to facilitate that. And I'm kind of envious of you in that respect. So if you are in the same position as Ryan, then why not try and get some upside by making those sorts of moves? Yes, it's difficult to remove Son, an informed player, but are you about to jump on a team such as Man United in 2 absolutely fantastic fixtures at Everton and Norwich with a bonus fixture of Liverpool in game week 33? Could be a really good move, because Fernandes seemed like the only legitimate option for me when I was watching that Man United game at the weekend. I thought Sancho was a bit of a letdown. Obviously, Ronaldo didn't play, so yeah, he seems like the most obvious option.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Havertz? Seeing him there.
A really difficult one, because obviously I chose Foden, and my priority for doing that was to make sure that I had 2 or even 3 City assets from game week 34, and just to preempt that now. So moving in the likes of Maddison or switching up a formation in game weeks 32 and 33, I don't have to focus on prioritising the City boys. I've already done it. I've brought in Laporte, I've brought in Foden. I can maybe look to bring in a 3rd City asset later on. But Havertz was the toss-up between Foden. And the reason I didn't go there was because Chelsea's next 2 fixtures, we're talking about last week, so they had Brentford and then Southampton. They were really good for Havertz. But then after that, I thought Chelsea's fixtures looked a bit tough. And I thought I'd rather target the City guys right now. They've got a decent fixture in Burnley. See what happens. Obviously, it didn't transpire and Foden didn't do anything. Just the fact that he played was a really nice bonus, to be honest. I think you don't really need to heed that many advice when you're looking at Man City options. As long as they play, they're probably going to get some points here and there. But yeah, Havertz's form, 0.6 big returns in the last 6, 0.4 small returns. Absolutely fantastic returns when you compare them to Foden.
Yeah.
I'm just, from all that we said earlier about Chelsea, do they have something to play for? How much is that rotation going to strike if Lukaku comes back in when they start playing the Champions League games this week and next week? Not 100% sure. So I think he's still a decent option. He's certainly probably a better option than Lacazette for the same sort of price. I would probably just still go for Foden because of the Man City fixtures.
Yeah. I do agree. Looking ahead, City have the nicer fixtures. It's interesting to compare Havertz and Kulusevski. So Havertz has actually outscored Kulusevski in FPL points in the last six matches. And the big returns and small returns, exactly the same for the 2 players there. Very similar in terms of big attempts and small attempts as well. But the narrative around the 2 players feels quite different. We were talking last week and your graphics really helpfully highlighted the amount of big chances that Havertz has been getting. And he's still got 2 big chances against Brentford in the 4-1 defeat. So whilst he wasn't able to put them away in this match, I don't think he's a bad hold up until game week 33 or 34 if you wanted to then make the switch to someone like a Foden, because Southampton in 32 is decent for Chelsea. And I think Havertz, depending on how he plays in the Champions League and what formation Tuchel goes, and the rotation potentially around Lukaku and Havertz. But I think Havertz's first choice is still getting the big chances. He missed 2 on the weekend, but he's getting into those positions, and he has recently as well. So I think we can expect that to continue.
I think weirdly he almost becomes an even better option from game week 34 if Chelsea get knocked out of the Champions League. I think they've arguably got the most difficult fixture in Real Madrid. Not sure what the odds are, but I would say that it's pretty even about who's going to go through. If Real Madrid get the nod, then I think Havertz, especially for their double in game week 36, to bring him in advance of that, even with the fairly difficult fixtures, I think he's still a great option. And if you can get the likes of Foden and Havertz in your team, absolutely fine with that. No problem at all. But as we've sort of been alluding to the entire video, there's so many options to look at. Like, I want some Leicester guys. We've got Maddison and Barnes here. Barnes better for small attempts. Maddison slightly better for the big ones. Who is on your radar? I know you already have Barnes, but if you could start again and pick one of them from scratch, who would it be?
I don't like that question because it's going to make me say Maddison when I want to be able to say Barnes. That performance from Maddison on the weekend was incredible. His delivery from set pieces and that left-footed cross for Iheanacho to score was remarkable. To do that with your weak foot and to beat both Manchester United defenders in the air and lay it on the platter for Iheanacho was incredible. So I think if I was picking now, I would probably go, it's tight. It's very close, but I think the upside is there with Maddison. He's probably more prone to rotation than Harvey Barnes. I think Harvey Barnes has kind of got that left wing spot locked up. But with Maddison, I think there's more chance of rotation. But this season, we have seen him score quite a few double-digit returns. And in that match, if it wasn't for VAR ruling out his goal to win the match, he would have had another double-digit return as well. So if I was picking a Leicester midfielder now, I would go with Maddison. I don't think there's too much to split them, but I think Maddison's explosive potential and we're seeing him on set pieces and how integral he is to Leicester. I think Maddison's a great option. What are your thoughts on Maddison and Barnes?
I mean, we had this discussion last week as well, and my thoughts haven't changed. Like, I always thought Maddison is the better player. Like, he's technically the better player. He has the capacity to score from anywhere outside the box. I don't think Barnes has that ability, but Barnes has to play slightly closer to goal in order to get some returns. But in any case, the main question, as you've alluded to, comes down to the minutes. And I think I would be more tempted to go Maddison if I thought that he wouldn't miss out completely in games, but more so his minutes would just be managed. So he would come off 65, 70 minutes most games. I think I would still pick him over Barnes if I knew that was going to happen, instead of Maddison just missing out completely once in a while. Because you've alluded to, he's so integral to that side. Like, Leicester get their results when Maddison is in form. And yes, he's also better when Vardy's on the pitch, but equally you could say that about Barnes as well. I think if I was just going to pick on ability, it would be Maddison, and sort of hope that he plays more consistent 70 minuters rather than completely missing out. Because obviously they're Leicester in Europe. That's the big problem here. Everyone sort of knows that already, but they're in Europe. Who knows what's going to happen? Whether Maddison is fit enough now after the recovery to play consecutive games in short spaces is another matter. But I kind of want Maddison for 33, and then I'm not that bothered. So I could just hokey-cokey him in and then move him on to someone else. Ward-Prowse on here is surprising, Brian. Like, I'm not 100% sure how he's managed to construct so many big attempts. And I'm going to assume that these are big chances created rather than big chances. Because rivaling the same sort of numbers as Havertz and Kulusevski, and even bettering Trent Alexander-Arnold and Cristiano Ronaldo is crazy.
Well, has he had any? Is this taking into account penalties as well?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Perhaps that comes into it. Yeah. Just with Maddison, I was looking at some of his stats. So he's started 21 times this season and he's been subbed off 12. So he's been subbed off in more than half of the games that he's started. His average appearance time is 66 minutes. That's his average.
Okay.
He's been subbed on 6 times as well. And to great effect recently, we saw him in the game against Burnley. He came on with 15 minutes to go and he got an assist in that game. I think he might have even got a goal as well. So, yeah, you're right. Maddison, the rotation risk is real, but he has been shown that he can get points from the bench, but he can also be subbed early. So it is about your risk appetite there.
Yeah, I think it's a case of less minutes for Maddison, probably more points potential when he's on the pitch, and completely the opposite for Barnes. I think more minutes for Barnes, less points. But like
in a double game week, though, like in a double game week, if you get 1 start out of Maddison and 2 starts out of Barnes, which one would you prefer?
If it was 1 start for Maddison and a 30-minute cameo, I'd be very tempted to go Maddison, actually. Yeah, I think he's just more important to that side. And I know we suffer from recency bias. When a player does really well in the most recent game week, you're like, oh my God, this is the best player ever. And we sort of have to normalize that to a certain extent. But when you have an opinion like last week or the previous week, and it's sort of backed up by what happens subsequently, it kind of confirms even more that is the right player to go for. And I haven't changed my thoughts about Maddison. He's still the better player. We're just still having the discussion about minutes, and it's really annoying. I really wish that he would just play all the time and we could just pick him. It's like a really obvious. But yeah, I mean, sorry, just going back to Ward-Prowse, is it silly to even consider him, or is he a genuine like option? Because Southampton obviously have a double game week in 33. Could he occupy one of our midfield spots?
No, not on a transfer. If you're on a free hit, I go for it. I really like Ward-Prowse as a footballer, and incredible free kicks, but not for a transfer. Midfield positions are so precious. Look at the amount of midfielders that are on here that we've been talking about already: Salah, Son, Fernandes, Havertz, Foden, De Bruyne, Coutinho, Barnes, Maddison. Where does Ward-Prowse fit into that? Only on a free hit, and even then, I think it's a bit of a risk.
I think he's fairly legitimate option. Like Saints have been lacking goals here and there, but when they've been scoring, Ward-Prowse kind of I can't believe how he's perfected that free kick technique. It's just absolutely jaw-dropping how he can do that so consistently. I think he's overtaken, what did they say on Match of the Day? Something like Thierry Henry and Gianfranco Zola as number of indirect free kicks scored or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely insane. But yeah, you're right to a certain extent. Yeah, I don't want to rely on a player who's just scoring wonder goals all the time. To a certain extent, there's a psychological element here. The same with Saka, but Saka is doing it from slightly closer to goal, I'd say, and he's doing it slightly more cleverly. So I don't know. You're right. I think there's so many options in midfield. I genuinely want to give the guy a chance to go on my team, but it's just
he seems like a nice guy. Like he's just the sympathy vote would go his way. Legitimate consideration if he's got a double game week against teams who struggle from set pieces. I haven't looked at the fixtures, but if there's a Leicester or Leeds or something in there, maybe he comes into more consideration because that increases the likelihood of him getting a return. If he's versing a team, Crystal Palace, they do struggle from set pieces, but I feel like we're kind of reaching for something with Ward-Prowse, and it's almost like the narrative comes before the actual return. So,
at least he'll make the good guy team. We should do that actually. We should make an FPL team just from like the nicest footballers, and then also like a bad boy team as well.
Son would definitely be in the good guy team. He'd almost captain the good guy team.
He would captain the good guy too.
Yeah.
Ward-Prowse. Who else? Who else is really nice? I think Kevin De Bruyne seems nice, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think Jared Bowen seems really nice.
I can't believe we're doing this. I
Yeah.
think
Oh man, but this is not what they've tuned in for.
this is not what you choose to. If you've got any input for the bad boy teams and the good guy teams, put it in the
The
chat.
bad boy teams. Yeah, I might actually. I'll go away from the TED Talk stream later, and I'll think about who I would put into the bad boy team and the good boy team. We could even select the manager as well.
It's just about everyone that sort of huffs when
Yeah.
their teammate doesn't pass to them. Like
Yeah, that's right.
I think Zaha would be captain of the bad boy team, wouldn't he?
Bad boy. Yeah, he's a bad boy.
He's a huffer. I think Salah gets pretty
Yeah.
frustrated as well. He can go in. Anyway, we've dwelled too much on this graphic. Let's move on and look at conversion stats. I'm going to look at defenders as well, but we're going to start off with the same sort of players we've looked on this chart, just to see like who's really converting, who has done well over the course of the season, rather than just in the last 6 game weeks. So these are season-long stats. And it's surprising to see, yeah, I have included the same guys. So we've got Robertson and Trent on here, but we'll look at defenders on the whole in a minute. But you can see who's best for small return conversion. Bowen, over the course of the season, unsurprisingly, very, very good with small returns. And Robertson, the best for big return conversion. And big return, I'm talking about big assists, big goals. Small return, I'm talking about small assists, small goals. So it's not just the shots, it's the chances created into assists as well. And it kind of doesn't surprise me about Robertson, because when we looked at last week, Ryan, about Robertson's big chances created and the fact that his teammates had converted all of the chances he created for them, 100% conversion, but presumably he's extrapolated that throughout the entire season and is converting big returns on a really, really high basis. So just to confirm to everyone, the big return conversion, like an elite level of returns, would be 50% big return conversion. That's what Salah's been doing year on year. All of the best players are about 50%. So quite a lot of these guys are overperforming that. Whereas with small returns, the average for the entire player pool is just 4%, which is what Salah and Trent are around that. But everyone else to the right of that are doing much better for small returns, which kind of says to me that these guys have like a really, really superior technical ability, or they're just being really efficient with those sorts of chances. So we've got Saka there, not very good with the big returns, and that's like, completely fine. He's only scored 3 big returns all season, but he scored 12 small returns. Absolutely fantastic. It surprised me that Harvey Barnes was so good for small returns. Yeah, very, very strange. But then we've got his teammate Maddison further towards the top right. And we want these guys to be top right for the best conversion stats. Coutinho, Kulusevski, also really, really good to go alongside Robertson. We've got Bowen on the graphic, and I know I'm jotting around from player to player here, but let's just focus on Bowen for a minute. Great performance at the weekend, back from fitness. Is he someone that could make it into your squads? We're talking about all of these 6-7 million midfielders. We haven't really talked about Bowen. I think West Ham's fixtures in the next 2 are quite decent. After that, they get a bit difficult, and there's not much guarantee of a double game week, I don't think. I might have to check that. What are your thoughts on Bowen for the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, not for me. Yeah, if you've got him in your team, he's fine to hold for the next couple of weeks. As you said, they've got nice fixtures, but he's not someone that I want to be transferring into my team. It was a really interesting performance from Bowen. It was his first game back after a little injury, and he was subbed around the 70th minute. He only made something like 12 or 13 passes, so he wasn't really involved in the game, but he comes away with an assist because he was fouled for the Cresswell free kick.
True.
And he gets a goal from an Antonio save rebound, and he was in the right place, and that's great positioning, credit to him. But the FPL returns, I think, don't necessarily justify the performance from Bowen. And at the end of the day, we are about the FPL returns, so we'll take the points. But no, I think the 13 points, Can I say lucky? I think it's a little lucky from Bowen to get the free kick assist like that. Cresswell putting it in the top corner to get the rebound from Antonio. I think that's a little lucky.
That's completely fair, and I think it's justified. If it wasn't that good a game, he's been out for a while, so coming back from fitness is always difficult. But yeah, we might, our perception of him might be a little bit skewed from the amount of FPL points he's got, rather than let's say the performance. But I thought he was still fairly lively. I thought Antonio was okay, but Antonio really hasn't gone back to what he was as an FPL option. He seems to be, I don't know, sort of fiddling about on the wings still. So I don't really know what's going on there. But yeah, West Ham's fixtures: Brentford away, Burnley at home, good, and then Chelsea, Arsenal, bad.
Yeah.
And then Norwich in 36. So he could be someone that you could go for on a free hit 36 as a single game week fixture if he's proven that he is back in form. So yeah.
Yeah, Norwich as a single fixture is almost as good as a double game week. So it's not terrible. This is so interesting because it's descriptive data, right? It's telling us what's happened in terms of the returns, the conversion rate, and then we're trying to use the descriptive data to predict what might happen moving forward. And, you know, you've alluded to it already throughout the stream. Understanding a player's historical performance can go some way to helping us understand what might continue to happen. So someone like Son, his small return conversion of around 8 or 9%, I think that's actually relatively low for Son. Normally, he's a little bit higher in terms of his small return conversion. So is that sustainable for Son? I think it probably is. I think it is. But for someone like Kulusevski, is that small return conversion rate sustainable? Well, we don't really know. And that's where we try and guess, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's a really good point. And I guess because he's passing to Son, someone who maybe have a sustainable conversion rate because he's scoring the goals, then maybe that's fine. But I get what you're saying. Like, quite a lot of these players, these are really high. These are elite level. Like Lacazette, if you gave him another whole season to play, I'm not sure he would get the same level of small returns, because I don't think Saka, Martinelli and Odegaard just score the same level of small chances. Like, sometimes these anomalies happen and you have to go along with it and expect them to happen going in the future, but it's not necessarily going to happen if you played an entire season again. I think you'd see completely different results, but it does give an indication of the type of goals these guys are scoring and the elite technical ability. Like, I think Coutinho is a prime example of that. He hasn't had many games since he came into that Villa team, but he's still got 8 returns in that time, and presumably from fairly low shot count, from chances created count, and he's really, really doing well in that conversion. And that just shows like how intuitive this player is, how he's hit the ground running at Villa, and what technical ability he has. So it is definitely worth, as you're saying, descriptive data. This is showing that Coutinho is an elite player, and I think we can use the context about how we view this player just in general, just ignoring all data, just seeing how good he was at Liverpool and going, right, he's got an elite conversion stat. Is that likely to happen in the future? Probably. So he could be a one from game week 34 that we get back on, especially if they have a double game week.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, some surprising things for me on here are Salah, Trent, Mane, Kane, all with fairly poor conversion when compared to quite a lot of these other players. And I guess there's one flaw in looking at this graphic, and that is if you're focusing on players that have a huge volume of shots or are incredibly involved in the game and pass to their teammates who have shots, those all go down as chances created. When you have players that have a huge volume of those attacking inputs, the fact that some of those goals won't be converted really suppresses that conversion. And it just means that they're very involved, and you know, they're still getting lots of chances. It's nothing to be surprised about, to be honest. I think just the other players are being more effective, more efficient with their of the chances they're having, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. So don't say, oh, Salah, Trent, Mane, Kane, they're all terrible options. I think it's just a matter of the conversion and the fact that these guys are so involved. But yes, I just wanted to talk about the City guys here because I've just brought in Foden, and when we talked about it last week, we did say that Foden's conversion had been sort of poor. And it sort of surprises me as well that De Bruyne is in the same sort of category. And this is what we were saying about the fact that he's only got 3 assists this season. Are his teammates letting him down and reducing this small return conversion, this big return conversion? Really, really poor. To see De Bruyne with the lowest big return conversion on this chart is just crazy. Like, I thought City players were better at converting his chances.
Yeah, well, I think a really great example of that came in the game at the weekend against Burnley. So Cancelo crossed the ball for Foden, who was inside the 6-yard box, and he kind of flicked it instinctively at the goal, and it was saved by Nick Pope with an outstretched foot. But to do that, Foden had to flick it through the legs of Tarkowski or whoever the defender was who was marking him quite closely at the time. And I think that went down as a big chance. The XG for that particular chance was really high. But watching that, that's not a big chance. He had his back to goal. The ball came at an awkward kind of angle. He was really closely marked by the defender. But then if we have a look back at that, like Foden's stats for that game, we'll see that he underperformed, that he had an XG of close to 1 and he didn't score. He didn't get an attacking return. And so we think that somehow these players are underperforming or they're not delivering on the stats that they should be. But I think, yeah, there's a little bit more context behind the statistics. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make. But yeah, certainly that's not the case for every opportunity. I think that's just worth highlighting there as we discuss Foden and De Bruyne. De Bruyne's small returns, they're 10 compared to his big returns of 3. Foden, I mean, I think his conversion rate is quite high for his small returns. I just would like to start seeing him get some more big chances. Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, exactly. Completely echo that. I want my City guys to have more big chances, like the Liverpool guys, like the Spurs guys. These are setting the pace for, big chances at the end of the day are going to be converted into goals more often than not. And I don't want, my players faffing about and, just letting everyone down with wayward shots. And this is what, Cancelo's done over the course of the season. We'll talk about defenders in a minute. But it poses a really interesting question, Ryan. Like, when we're choosing City options, particularly from Game Week 34, are you going to side with the guys that are expected to have higher minutes? Or are you going to go with the guys who have higher conversion, like Mahrez or Sterling, but maybe their expected minutes are less and they come on off the bench and have, inconsistent levels of, like affecting the game?
Yeah.
So I think Foden and De Bruyne probably have the most expected minutes because that's what's happened over the course of the season. We saw it in Game Week 3 hit 27, where the template was Sterling, Mahrez, and Cancelo, and Foden and De Bruyne both scored, I think, instead of those guys, and Sterling and Mahrez blanked. So that says it all. I think the merry-go-round of City is very difficult to call, but I think probably the most sensible option is to go with the highest expected minutes. But
I agree. I think just quickly, the contrast that you've highlighted between the Liverpool and City assets is captured really well in this graph. Look at the Robertson, Salah and Trent circles and even Mane compared to the positioning of the De Bruyne and Foden circles. I think this graph is brilliant at kind of highlighting that. So yeah, really good point. But as you say, I think expected minutes is almost the most important statistic when thinking about City players. And for me, when I'm looking at bringing City players in 34, I will be going for the likes of Foden, and Laporte and Cancelo, because I can guarantee, well, I'm more likely to get minutes out of those guys as opposed to Mahrez and Sterling, who on their day certainly have a higher ceiling. Sterling's quite capable of getting, 2-3 attacking returns in any match, but he's not as nailed as Foden. He's not as nailed as Cancelo. And I think in any single game week, Mahrez can completely outscore Foden, and so can Sterling. But across a stretch of 6 game weeks or 7, which is what I'll own them for, I think Foden outscores Mahrez and Sterling in that time.
It's such a pity we have to pick like players from one of the best teams in the league just because we think they're going to get more minutes. I really want to I want to pick a player just because I think he's the best player, and not because he's going to play more often in a side that is perceived to score loads of goals. It hasn't been happening recently. It's been 1-0s, 2-1s, 2-0s, all that sort of stuff. I want them to score more goals. And I think once they start getting back to the 3-0s, 4-0s, then Foden's going to be more involved, especially if he's on the pitch more often. But it's really difficult. I think Liverpool options are much more obvious. And I know that some FPL managers want to be able to separate themselves from the rest of the FPL managers who don't necessarily have that foresight about who's going to perform and make it more difficult. But I kind of want a few obvious City options so I can just buy them rather than second guessing myself the whole time about whether they're going to play or whether they're even going to score. Like Foden gets on the pitch and doesn't even do anything. It's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, I don't think, trying to guess Pep is as difficult as what people make out. Credit to people like Emma and Luke on Twitter. If you don't follow them, you should definitely go and follow them on Twitter. Luke does his own prediction for Man City lineups each week, and he goes into great detail as to why he thinks those players will be picked. The midfield 3 is pretty much the same most weeks, with Rodri, Bernardo Silva, and Kevin De Bruyne. Bernardo Silva was benched, of course, in the game against Burnley, but he did come on. And then up front, we know that he favours Mahrez in the Champions League, but we also know that Mahrez, with his ability to retain possession and to kind of play in front of a defensive line, I think Pep favours that over bringing someone like Sterling who can get in behind a defensive line. So if you're versing a team that might be setting up with a deep block, then there could be justification there for picking a Mahrez who can play in front of that deep block as opposed to Sterling who might need to come in behind. Now, I'm not pretending to be an expert on the City lineup, but the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think we need to resign ourselves to just saying, oh, well, I give up. I'm just going to pick Mahrez. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just going to pick Foden. I think that if you want to try and think about it and second guess Pep, I don't think it's as impossible as what people make out.
Yeah, I agree with you, and your point's well made. That the issue is that we've got other things to think about, other transfers to prioritise, double game weeks to focus on, and I don't really want to spend half my time all my transfers going, oh, I think this is Sterling's game, so I'm going to focus my transfer on bringing in Sterling. And
correct,
you've nailed it. You've put the nail on the head. Like, I don't want a player that's only going to be played against opposition that has a particular weakness. I want an FPL asset that's going to play regardless of the type of opposition because it's guaranteed minutes, it's guaranteed chances. I think Foden is probably that one because he's probably the youngest and fittest of them all, and he's played the most minutes, I think, out of all of that front line this season. But yeah, I think we've dwelled on this too much, but that probably emphasizes how much of a head shaker this is. It's just very, very difficult to nail the City hauls because you have to focus on, is the opposition going to suit this person? Are they going to play in the first place? So yeah, really difficult, but there's a nice emphasis on the graph about the conversion levels. I think the fact that they're not playing with a recognised striker like they did with maybe Jesus or Aguero in previous seasons, probably does hinder the big chance conversion, which is what we're seeing here. So yeah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about on this chart? We've got Zaha here, maybe a potential option with Palace's good fixtures when he gets fit again. You got the United guys, fairly lackluster in their conversion, but I think Fernandes probably still the best option. I don't think anything else sticks out. I think, Rafinha there next to Kane. He's an easy sell from game week 33, I think. There's plenty of other options. Let's move on to the defenders. We've got the last graphic here, and then we'll look at our game week 32 bus teams. Conscious of the time, we've been going on for about an hour and a half. But it's been a good discussion, nevertheless. The defenders will be a fairly quick chat because it's not really contrary to our general perception of these guys. I think the template is moving towards like Trent and Robertson and James and Cancelo, all of the premium options here. And it's exactly the same chart as with the elite attackers we've just seen. Robertson and Trent haven't changed their position, but we've got Reece James to go alongside Robertson, like one of the best converters of chances. And what does that say? We perceive Reece James as one of the best defenders, best attacking options in the game. And this sort of chart shows that.
Yeah, completely. It's funny. We've been talking and kind of touching on the balance of narrative around a player and then the stats that are there to kind of contradict or support that narrative. And with Reece James, the stats certainly seem to support that narrative and that he is a fantastic converter of big chances. And you can see him positioned right up there with Robertson as well. So big returns, 6 big returns and 5 small returns in limited minutes. So we're comparing minutes from Reece James to Robertson. He's almost matching Robertson in terms of the returns, but in quite significantly reduced minutes, which I think is important to highlight as well. Yeah, Reece James, a fantastic asset, not so great on the weekend though.
Yeah, that no fault of his own, I don't think, because obviously he got limited minutes in a particularly difficult game for Chelsea, it seemed. Not sure we saw any of that coming, though, because Tuchel's comments were particularly encouraging about Reece James starting that game. Although, if you read into it too much, sometimes the managers do kind of mislead us. And he said something like, yeah, he's fit and he is in the squad for tomorrow. Yeah, so that's probably the particular word that was the giveaway. But nevertheless, I think the positive connotation was there, and I think he easily could have started on another day. So just really unlucky for Reece James owners. I think from now on, he's definitely a buy. I think he absolutely fantastic. He really changes that Chelsea side for me in terms of that attacking spirit. So I imagine he will start against Real Madrid, and then I probably will start against Southampton at the weekend. So fingers crossed he can get back to those attacking
Yeah,
goals.
I just don't think Tuchel can play 4 at the back again. And if he plays 5 at the back, Reece James you'd think has to start.
You've got to think so.
I'm going to ask you, because I was mentioning the narrative and the stats and that kind of discussion. Cancelo, right down the bottom there, small return conversion, big return conversion for Cancelo. Do you think the narrative around Cancelo's attacking output this season is justified by the stats? Do you think there's a contradiction there? What are your thoughts?
So I think Cancelo has always struggled for conversion, and even this went back to last season as well. But we spoke about this last week when we looked at his graphic. He flatters to deceive a lot of the time, because when we watch him play football, we go, wow, what an insane player. I need him in my FPL side. He shoots on sight. City are just so big for possession. Always comes out to him on the left or the right, wherever he's playing. He's so versatile, so keen to get the ball in the box, so keen to get a shot off. But these attempts, he doesn't seem to have the knack for getting these shots converted as often as the amount of time he's showing intent. So you can see the distribution here. He's got 2 big returns all season. One of them was a goal, one of them was an assist. 7 small returns, 6 of them assists, and only one of them
one goal.
No, sorry, I got confused about it. I think he's 2 big assists, no big goals. One of them was a small goal, and 6 of them were small assists. So clearly, his 6 small assists, he's just been passing off to a player or
Yeah.
in a difficult position, and the player, because of their class ability, they play for City, they've done the rest. So you could argue that Cancelo's attacking returns have been fairly fortunate. He hasn't done enough to really drive those big chances home, to create those big chances for his teammates, like Trent, like Robertson, like Reece James has done over the course of the season. Is his price tag of 6.9 million? No, he's 7 million now. Is that worth it? And again, we're talking about City assets with poor conversion who are nailed, and we're picking them because they're nailed. But you've got Laporte there. Could he be a reasonable compromise?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Like, I agree with everything that you've just said. It's that Cancelo, he almost, and we did say this last week, with City's defensive stats being so good, he almost starts each match with a clean sheet. And you could see City going the rest of the season keeping a clean sheet in every match. If they kept a clean sheet at home to Liverpool, would you be surprised? Probably not, really. I mean, the only goals that Liverpool scored against Watford, one was a penalty and the other was a Diogo Jota header. I mean, they didn't exactly create too many big chances in that match at home to Watford. Of course, across the season, Liverpool have been great. But the point I'm making is that City's defence is great. Therefore, Cancelo's going to be starting most matches with a clean sheet. I was having a discussion with someone on Twitter earlier in the week, a friend of mine, and he picked up on the eye test around Cancelo that you've just mentioned. And he said that he believed it was only luck that Cancelo hasn't returned an attacking return in 70% or roughly of the games that he's played. You know, he's hit the post or he's come close with his shots, and players missing off an easy chance that he may have created. And I kind of thought straight away of Mbeumo earlier in the season when we had a player who was consistently hitting the post or coming very close with his shots. And the question was, well, is that unlucky or is that just poor finishing? And I think we've seen in his case, it's poor finishing. And I think we're seeing with Cancelo, he's just not a very good finisher. That's okay. He's a defender, but with the amount of shots that he's taken and his small conversion or his very low conversion, I think his goal conversion is at 1% this season. You kind of start to think that maybe he's just not a very good shooter, and maybe the shot volume isn't that important for someone like Cancelo. Another point that a person made in the discussion was about his XGI delta, right? So if, for instance, he should have been involved in 5 goals this season, but he's only been involved in 2, there's a negative delta of 3. For Cancelo, his negative delta does not come through his assists. It only comes through his goals. So Cancelo was expected to get 4.7 assists this season, and he's registered 5. He was expected to score 3 goals, and he's only scored 1. So the negative delta doesn't come from people not finishing the chances he creates. The negative delta comes through his inability to score goals that he otherwise should. So if all you're getting out of Cancelo is a clean sheet and a few bonus, can't you get that from Laporte?
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a really good point. But I think the assist XA figure you had there, I think that has been evened out by his teammates overperforming the difficult chances he's created for them and underperformed the big returns that he's created. And that's sort of evident on this chart here, the 30%. But he will never have a big chance because his positioning is just never going to yield that. Whereas all of his expected goals are going to come from outside the box. And I really get your point about, is he just a bad finisher? And a lot of people who are skeptical about treating stats in forecasting football would say, oh, these are just stats monkeys just going, oh, look at this number. That means he's a poor finisher. I don't watch any football. I don't know how to gauge whether a footballer is good or not. Because when you watch Cancelo, he's a really talented player. But maybe being a talented player and affecting the game around you is completely different to technical shooting ability. I wonder whether that is a trend. And he is capable of having like a an 18-point haul in a game. But how often does that happen? It only happened once or twice last season. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's happened that many times this season either. So,
Mm.
yes, he was an absolute staple in our sides earlier this season because he was playing 90 minutes every game. I think anything else above that is a bonus. So, this isn't a trying to make me look good, but I transferred in Laporte last week instead of Cancelo, and we've had one game. They both got 6 points. Yes, Cancelo could absolutely burn me after this conversation by putting in an outstanding performance and getting a goal, an assist, and a clean sheet. But quite frankly, the stats do not suggest that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's all we can assess as FPL managers, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I remember the goal he scored last season against West Brom that was flagged offside initially, and then VAR overturned it. And I think it hit the underside of the crossbar and went in from outside the 18-yard box. So, these goals that he has scored, and even the goal I think he scored against Newcastle earlier in the season, they're not exactly things that the statistics are saying can be replicated, or we should expect them to be replicated throughout the season. So I'm not scared at the moment of not owning Cancelo. I still think he's a great asset. He's probably the most nailed player in the City defence. And if he starts most weeks with 6 points as part of the clean sheet, you would take that. But Laporte, for a lot less, I think Laporte is just about on par, or maybe even he's close enough. He's close enough.
I mean, the fact that Laporte's got 5 returns this season, Cancelo's got 9. From the massive disparity in the amount of chances that Laporte has actually had, his conversion is much higher for those small returns. I kind of just see him as a decent compromise to enable some of these more expensive midfielders when we want to get a City player in our midfield at some point, whether you've got one or not, whether you want to add to a second midfielder from City, that price saving is only going to enable you to do that. And let me just get this straight. Like, a lot of people in the chat are saying, oh, it's not nice to hear this after I brought in Cancelo this week. The fact that Cancelo has so many opportunities, it doesn't mean that he's not going to convert any of these going forwards. The fact that he's always showing intent, just to look at this through a different lens, is enough of a security. Like, you always feel like he's going to do something, and maybe he will. Maybe he will get some luck. Maybe that shot will just float 6 inches left where it hit the post, maybe previously. So the fact that you've gone for a player that shows so much intent but has struggled with conversion, that conversion element could change. But from my perspective, the conversion data probably won't change. And I'm happy having Laporte instead of Cancelo until this is soundbited and Cancelo's got like a 20-point haul next week.
Yeah.
But in any case, this chart is just to show conversion. It doesn't mean to say that this is the quality of the player. I think it just helps us enable discussion about looking at assessing how people actually play. We haven't talked about Doherty yet here, Ryan. Obviously, Doherty's only come back in recently after being left out under previous managers. And finally, Conte wants to give him a chance. And I think he's raised his game recently. The conversion stats are strong. So is he a staple in our sides until the end of the season?
I think he is. The fact that he can play on the left as well only increases the appeal, I think. When it comes to rotation, Reguilon has shown that he's not really capable from a physical point of view of playing multiple times in a week in the Conte system. The demands that Conte places on his wing backs are hard for any footballer to replicate multiple times in a week. And I think Reguilon has shown that recently. So Doherty being able to play on the left and the right, I think is fantastic for his prospects. I think Doherty's been, part of the renaissance, if you like, of Conte's system and Spurs' upturn in form. the positions, I think it's really key what you've mentioned about Cancelo and his positioning. Doherty, he's getting to the byline, he's getting inside the box. I mean, he's getting into positions that you would expect a striker to get into, whereas Cancelo, by contrast, largely operates in that pocket, in kind of like the underlap pocket just outside the 18-yard box. And if I've got a defender, I want my defender, if I can, like the Alonso of old, getting into the box and taking shots. And that's where Doherty is at the moment. So I think Doherty is a great shout at 4.7. I think he's worth considering as the third Spurs asset and worth holding up until 36, the double, then, and potentially through to the end of the season.
Yeah, definitely how a side plays definitely makes their defenders a worse or a better option. In this case, Spurs are not a high possession side. They have never been. Over the last 2 or 3 seasons, they've been a counter-attacking side. And when they play with wing-backs, the wing-backs have huge potential to have a lot of space and to dive into that box at the last minute, like Doherty did for his goal. Whereas the likes of Cancelo, where City have, 60, 70% of the ball in the entire game, it's more like a build-up approach. There's less space in behind. Cancelo's always like cutting in and trying to cross it rather than diving into the box and getting those big chances that Doherty seems to be getting in recent weeks. So there's a massive contrast how a team plays and how useful that defensive asset might be. But yeah, very happy owning, and 4.7 million, I think he still is. Absolute bargain at the moment. So yeah, if you want an enabler defender rather than going full premium, then he's definitely one to look at. I just want to address, echo the same sentiments that we were talking about with comparing Cancelo and Laporte, and do that with Reece James and Rudiger, because I think it's a slightly different conversation. And I think, yes, there's some recency bias. Rudiger scored his goal at last. He's been having tons of shots from outside the box. And as a centre-back, that's absolutely fantastic. But let's not forget, it was an absolute wonder strike. Do we expect him to do that again before the end of the season? I'm not so sure. Yes, he might score a header. He's probably better than that. He's probably going to get more headers than wonder strikes. But when you compare him to the likes of Reece James, who just has multiple additional strings to his bow, it's just no comparison for me. Is that short-sighted, Ryan, or do you think that Reece James is just a bit head and shoulders above Rudiger?
Yeah, was your point there that Reece James is head and shoulders above Rudiger? Is that what you were saying? Yeah, I do agree. I think it's difficult to compare Reece James, Rudiger with the Cancelo, Laporte. This graph highlights that. Cancelo and Laporte, in terms of their conversion percentages and the big chances and small chances that they're getting, they're not too dissimilar. But the contrast between Rudiger and James is huge. There's a massive gulf there. And Reece James's big chances and his conversion of those big chances mean that even if he is less likely to start multiple matches, like Rudiger, for instance, I think his conversion rate is so high that his ceiling, his attacking potential will more than make up for the lack of expected minutes, if you like. Yeah. For me, I think Reece James is head and shoulders above.
Just to play devil's advocate, the only reason why you could argue that Rudiger was probably a better asset than Reece James is because of those expected minutes and the fact that Chelsea have been fairly strong defensively all season, and Rudiger might get more clean sheet points than Reece James, and I think he has this season because he's played more games. And if you think that same level of appearance is going to continue for the rest of the season, then there could be a comparison, but just purely from attacking potential, Reece James head and shoulders above Rudiger, way more than Cancelo is over Laporte, in my opinion.
Completely. And there's a difference in price as well. Like Laporte is 5.8, Cancelo's 7. The price difference between Reece James and Rudiger is negligible, I think.
Yeah, it's 0.1.
Yeah. So for 0.1 difference, you're getting way more upside with Reece James, whereas Laporte can come close to covering Cancelo. I don't think he can, but I think he can get close enough for the 1.2 million saving.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I don't know what Ailing's doing up there, by the way. No idea. I think it's
I think he's
probably
lost. He's lost.
judging by the amount of returns he's got, I'm not sure he gets many chances, but when he does, he seems to convert them quite well. But yeah, like 5 attacking returns is more than I thought Ailing would have all season. But yeah, clearly very clinical.
Seeing Cresswell up there makes me sad. He was a favourite asset of mine last season. It's a shame that he hasn't had the same kind of impact this season. Injuries have played a part as well. What are your thoughts on Van Dijk? If most managers have Trent, you've got Salah. We're thinking about a third asset. Robertson's fantastic. We know that. But if you can't stretch to a Robertson, are you considering a Van Dijk or a Matip?
I think I would probably go Matip over Van Dijk because they still present the same sort of chances. I'm not sure Van Dijk really adds too much more over Matip. They're both capable of getting bonus through clearances, blocks, interceptions. I think Matip's really good this season. And Matip, by the way, his big return conversion is about the 60% mark, same as Van Dijk. He's off this chart because he's not very good for small returns. But because of the cost saving, I think he's still 4.9 million, something like that. And really budget option for Liverpool and expected to play most games until the end of the season. So if you want to shop in the bargain basement aisle, Matip for sure over Van Dijk. But otherwise, there's no reason to avoid Trent or Robertson for me.
Yeah, as a Liverpool fan, are you thinking that Matip won't play multiple matches, like in a double game week, for instance, that Konate might come in? Do you have any concerns about that?
Potentially. It's very difficult to say, though. I mean, Klopp has the capacity to rest his players in sort of dead rubbers to a certain extent, but there's no reason why Matip should be rested. I think he's capable of playing all of these games, but maybe Klopp wants to give other players a chance, especially when we have a higher profile FA Cup game to play. We have higher profile Champions League games to play. The hectic fixture schedule makes managers do strange stuff. So it's very difficult to predict. I think Matip probably plays both games. And if you want to make that cost saving, he's a very legitimate option. I think Van Dijk is probably 4th on my preference list out of all of those 4, which is funny to say. But yeah. Okay, let's move on from this. We've had a really good discussion today. An hour and 53 minutes so far is a very long discussion. Let's finish off by talking about our transfer plans for Game Week 32. Bringing up your team here, Ryan. 4-4-2. Ramsdale in goal against Brighton. Alexander-Arnold, James, Dan Burn and Doherty. Saka, Salah, Son and Barnes, with Kane captain and Weghorst accompanying him up front.
Yeah. So look, this week, game week 31 and potentially even game week 32, I am expecting a little bit of a hit. Having to play someone like Dan Burn or even a Connor Cody in defence, I just don't fancy playing Gordon at home to Manchester United. And Newcastle, apart from like the game against Spurs, Newcastle have looked fairly strong defensively. I think they've only conceded 1 goal in each of their last few games. So, they were unlucky against Chelsea to concede a late goal. They were unlucky, I guess you could say, to concede a late goal against Everton, 10-man Everton. They should have held on for a clean sheet there. So Newcastle defensively, not the worst team, playing at home against Wolves. That's an okay fixture. The rest of the team, I think, looks all right. My plan, though, as I've mentioned before, is to sell Son in game week 33 for Bruno Fernandes. I don't want to sell Son for a hit. And so because I don't have the funds in the bank, I'm going to roll this game week unless something comes up. I'll roll this game week, and then that will allow me to go Son to Bruno. And then I'm looking at going Connor Cody to a Fofana at 4.3. And that will give me the money to do those moves with a couple, a little bit left over in the bank for price changes and whatever else. But I like Fofana, 4.3, decent entry into the Leicester defence, which has not been something we've been looking to target very much this season. But with Johnny Evans, James Justin, Castagna back now as well, I would prefer James Justin, but I just don't think I've got the budget. Fofana is a threat from set pieces. He came very close against United to scoring if it wasn't for a David De Gea incredible save. So the Fofana move, it gives me an extra double game week player in 33, again in 36 if I want to. And it facilitates that Son to Bruno move quite nicely. And then the plan from there would be Bruno down to a Phil Foden or even someone like a Kevin De Bruyne. But I'm leaning more towards Foden because then that enables me to start upgrading Burn and start upgrading guys like Gordon and whoever else to Robertson or to a Laporte or to a Cancelo. So that's kind of the strategy over the next few game weeks.
Yeah, I like it. I played around with a Cody to Fofana enabling transfer as well. So I think that's a really good move. And anyone else who is in the same boat and wants some funds and can't think of a way of doing it, then Fofana under the radar. Who knows whether Leicester will improve their defensive capability with a change in personnel as well? Because Fofana was always he brought the best out of Soyuncu, I think. I think Johnny Evans was also a good partner, but yeah, I think maybe the sheer volume of fixtures that Leicester have coming up is enough for you to invest in a 4.3 Leicester defender. It's not much of an ask. So if it enables you to do what you need to do, then that's absolutely fantastic. I do like the little hokey cokey that you're doing with Bruno Fernandes in and captain. I think that just justifies the move, to be honest, and fingers crossed it works out for you, because I can imagine that people who aren't free hitting, Bruno Fernandes is going to be a bit of a differential for those teams like yourself that are going to captain him. So I have no idea who I'm going to captain in game week 33. But
that's the thing. Yeah, it's just who do you captain if you're not on a free hit or if you don't have a United asset?
Really difficult. We've got Leicester with a good double game week, but are you really going to captain Maddison or Barnes? Not sure.
Arsenal have a double game week. You could go for a Saka or you're scraping the barrel, aren't you? But yeah. No, look, the team looks okay. A little subpar this week, as I mentioned, having to play someone like Dan Burr, but I'm happy with the strategy moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting to see what Weghorst will do against Norwich. I think that will be a really indicative thing for people who haven't brought in Weghorst, because I'm not worried at the moment, but he's got Everton. And you never know, he could get something there because Everton have been woeful. And then Norwich, I think if he doesn't go through both of those games without any returns, then it probably goes down as a mistake. But I think he's got every chance of doing that. And ahead of a double game week 33, with reasonable fixtures for Burnley, I think owners will be pretty happy going into that with these two fixtures, Everton and Norwich. So yeah, fingers crossed for you. Not too much fingers crossed because I don't own him. So
it's always a bit like that, isn't it?
Exactly. But yeah, no, the team looks good, mate. And fingers crossed your transfer plans work out. But yes, let's move on to mine. Finish it off. Now, because I brought in 2 City last week, I have this horrible head-to-head Liverpool versus City, 2 Alexander-Arnold and Salah versus Laporte and Foden. I think my transfer will be fairly straightforward this week. It's looking like Cody or Digne to Reece James, and I have enough money to do that, plus a bit extra to do Rafinha to Maddison in game week 33 if I want to do that. Haven't made my mind up. Still don't know whether I'm going to be free hitting in 33 or not. If I do free hit, I won't be making that Maddison move, of course, and try and focus my transfers on setting up for game week 36 and 37 as best I can, with lots of Liverpool, City, Spurs, even Arsenal. Maybe keeping Harry Kane, because even though Spurs are meant to have quite a difficult double game week in 36, I think Kane can still get something out of it. I just won't be able to get as good a team as everyone else free hitting or whatever. But the current plan is to not free hit in 33. And if I continued with that plan, I would only have 4 or 5 players for the doubles. And that kind of fills me with a little bit of dread. The issue is every free hit draft I put together always avoids some of the key single game week players. How can I possibly go without Salah? How can I go without Kane? How can I go without... It's really difficult. Even the premium defenders, such as Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, Cancelo, Laporte, Reece James, all of these guys have single fixtures.
Mm.
it's going to be really a big gamble to load up on the double game weeks and to see all of these teams fire in the single fixtures.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't be too concerned though with the amount of double game week players you have in 33. I think the top 10K template right now, with most people would have 2 to 3 Arsenal. I think the average is only on about 5 predicted double game week players for 33. So anything less than 5, I don't think. Sorry, I should say 5 or above is fine. You're talking. I think you said you had 4 double game week players for 33 as things stand. I don't think that's that far from an issue. Like, it's not really an issue, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, at least they'd be from fairly decent teams. 3 Arsenal and a Maddison. That would be my double game week constituent, and then the rest of the team made up with Liverpool, City, Reece James, loads of Spurs. It's probably not too bad, is it? I mean, but there's a huge emphasis on those single game week teams, those decent teams, getting results against their respective opponents. And, on a normal game week, I think that would be absolutely fine. It's if Leicester, if Newcastle, if Burnley, if Everton don't double. If those previous 3 teams go off on one, then I'm in trouble. But
that's a big if.
It's a big if. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It is a big if.
I was going to ask, with your transfers, if you brought in Reece James this week, who are you benching?
Yeah, really good question. And I think we had a question earlier in the chat which said, would you rather bench Doherty or Kulusevski this week? It's a really difficult one.
Jacob asked the same question. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think Jacob asked it earlier, actually, thinking about it. So he's presumably got the same problem as me. Really difficult one. I think it would have to be Doherty, because Reece James is a defender. I think Kulusevski probably can get an attacking return against Villa. Do I expect Villa to score against Spurs? Probably. I think if Newcastle can score against them, then maybe Aston Villa. Coutinho's really decent conversion stats. Watkins is in fairly decent form. Spurs aren't that solid defensively. They're just scoring more goals than everyone else. So it would probably be Doxy that I would bench. But as we've seen this week, that can go terribly wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Although Newcastle did score a Fabian Schär free kick.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though. Spurs defence, it's kind of been more of a let's just score more than they do approach. If I can offer an encouragement with your transfers, talking about Luca Dean or Cody, I would encourage you to transfer Cody out as opposed to Luca Dean. I think there's a chance that he doubles in 34. The fixtures from then on are really nice for Aston Villa as well. So if money's not too much of an issue, I know that there's a slight price difference there. But if I can encourage you to transfer Cody out as opposed to Luca Dean, I'd just offer that.
Yeah, really good piece of advice. And it was definitely something I was looking for until Digne went off, apparently. I didn't even watch the game, but he went off.
He did too,
15 minutes or something. So need to find out how badly that injury affected him. He hasn't been flagged in FPL yet, surprisingly. So I don't really know what the situation is. But yeah, Aston Villa have a very strong prospect of a decent double game week in 34. So if you're in the same position as me and you've still got Coutinho and a Luca Dean, then maybe now is the time to try and hold on to those guys, because I think, arguably people could prioritise Villa players in 34 over Man City players ahead of their run of decent fixtures. Whether that's a good idea or not is another matter. But
yeah. I just want to ask another question about your team, because I think a lot of managers will have the City versus Liverpool situation in their team this week. What are you expecting from that, from an FPL return point of view?
Like, thinking about it, now that you've asked me that question, I could bench Laporte instead of Doherty, actually. How many attacking returns is he going to get against Liverpool? Not 100% sure. But yeah, going back to your question, I quite like owning really like players from a big game that are so prolific, such as Liverpool and City, that I'm going to be watching that game from an enjoyment perspective. I'm going to be enjoying it from an FPL perspective and from a like an experience perspective.
Yeah.
But my expectations will be fairly unsure. Like it's going to be an incredible occasion, but inherently unpredictable. And that's not what we want as FPL managers. We want loads of players who play Burnley and Norwich and Brentford and all this.
Yeah.
But who knows? Like I think I'm just going to enjoy having players, and whatever happens, happens. Hopefully, I get an FPL returns, and hopefully Liverpool win. But that'll be it. I'm not sure I'm going to have that many expectations, but I think it's going to save me some thoughts, to be honest.
Yeah, what a game! Just from a football point of view, I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, it would be so good. It's literally, I think it's going to be title deciding, because I'm not sure how many points Liverpool and City dropped. We saw them. Was it 3 years ago, where they were in exactly the same position and both sides didn't drop a point until the end of the season, and City took it. I wonder whether the same thing happens, but the difference is that they play each other next Sunday. It's going to be huge. Absolutely huge. Can't wait.
I think the fallout will be interesting for us. We need to see if there are any consequences. Like if Liverpool lose, for instance, do they then start turning their attention to the Champions League more and the FA Cup? I'm not saying that they'll give up completely, but the consequences and the implications for FPL will extend beyond this match. And whatever happens in this match, as you've said, I think if it is a title decider and one team wins it emphatically or whatever it might be, I think, it'll be interesting to see how it affects the FPL landscape moving forward.
Nice. Goodness me, that was a long one.
Yeah, apologies.
Over 2
I kept
hours.
talking.
Yeah, sorry guys, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I'm going to add in some timestamps for those who want to maybe revisit certain sections. And if you're watching it for the first time, fingers crossed, it will give you a little bit more flexibility about which part you want to watch. But yes, we'll end it there. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Ryan for staying up late in Australia to join us. Thank you for having... not thank you for having me, Ryan. I've been hosting you.
Thank you for having me.
We got there. 2 hours drained my mental ability, so I can't even speak anymore. Here we go. Thanks again, everyone. Best of luck for the rest of Game Week 31 if you've got any players left. Arsenal for quite a lot of us to play later on. And then I think it's Burnley-Everton on Wednesday, Ryan. I might have got that wrong.
It's Thursday morning, 5 a.m.
Thursday morning for you.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, cheers all. Best of luck, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.